Got it. Hello.
Hello. I have the first grade.
Yeah. Sorry. So we are going to do. So now we are recording. Good on that. Okay. This will work. Okay.
You don't have to be seen, you can just look.
So this is not a Hayehudim Ba'im sketch that is particularly germane to anything we're talking about tonight. I just found it really funny and I thought you all would enjoy it. So there will be English subtitles at the bottom. I'm sorry, one sec, the sound isn't coming through, so I'm gonna just share from the other screen, from the other, really quickly. Sorry, I apologize. The best laid plans.
Okay. Now see you soon. Yes.
All right.
To credit.
Share screen. All right.
Event. Okay. You see, I get better at it. The disclaimer here.
והדיבר האחרון, לא תחמוד אשת רעך. יש? הכל בסדר? כן. אפשר ללכת לאכול צהריים? מה יש לאכול היום? משה בתיבה. אפשר יום אחד בלי הבדיחה הזאת? תודה. הלכנו. יאללה, בוא נאכל משהו.
רגע, פליטה.
מרים, אני ביקשתי ממך לא לקרוא לי ככה ליד העם, נכון?
בסדר, תגיד, לא נראה לך משהו מוזר בדיברות האלה?
מה, זה שזה נראה כמו תחת?
לא, לא זה. אתה יודע, נו, לא תרצח, לא תגנוב.
נו.
מה אם לא תאנוס?
לא היה? היה משהו דומה, לא, זה לא תאנוס את אביך ואת אמך, לא תאנוס גדי בחלב אמו, לא היה?
לא, לא היה שום דבר על זה.
נו בסדר, אז אין בעיה, קחי את הדיברות, תוסיפי מה שאת רוצה, יש לך כתב יפה.
פליטה, תאסוף את כולם בחזרה ותגיד להם שאלוהים אמר.
נו באמת, מירי, באמת, זה לא יכול לחכות.
לא, זה לא יכול לחכות.
למה זה לא יכול לחכות? הבנתי, בסדר. כולם לחזור בבקשה, יש לי עוד משהו קטן להגיד לכם, בואו, רוצים לאכול. שקט, הקשבה אליי עוד רגע, זוכרים את 10 דיברות האלה? אז יש עוד אחד, לא תאנוס, סבבה שכל אחד יוסיף אצלו, יופי.
מה זה לא תאנוס? תגיד לי מה זה...
שקט, תסתום את הפה, פשוט לא לאנוס.
מה אם היא לבושה עם מחשוף? זה נחשב אונס?
אונס. ואם היא לא בהכרה?
ברור שזה אונס.
ברור שזה אונס, אפשר להמשיך.
ואם היא מתה?
גם אם היא מתה, זה עדיין אונס. אז פשוט לא לאנוס, בסדר?
ומה אם היא אומרת לא אוהב, ואני לא מבין למה היא מתכוונת?
לא.
אני לא מבין למה אתה מתכוון.
לא, זה עם של קקות?
מה אני אומר לך כל הזמן?
רגע.
ומה אם זאת מישהי שכבר יצאנו בעבר כמה וכמה פעמים, כן? וכבר שכבנו בעבר, ועכשיו אנחנו רק ידידים, והיא באה אליי הביתה בקטע של ידידים, והישנו קצת, ונרדמנו באותה מיטה, והיא עשתה לי סימן כזה שיש מצב, ואז אנסתי אותה.
זה אונס? תגידו לי, מה יש לכם? מה קרה? אסור לאנוס. לא שאלו אתכם אם אתם רוצים, אמרו לכם אסור לאנוס. לא אם עשתה טיזינג, לא אם יצאתם פעם, לא אם ראית אותה ערומה. אסור לאנוס, מה לא ברור?
תודה רבה.
אלא אם אתה קצין.
מה? לא.
מה לא?
מה לא? עכשיו גם לא קצין? די, נו, מה זה? שינו את כל החוקים ולא אמרו לנו. הרגע קיבלת את החוקים, הרגע. טוב, תקשיבו, אין לי בעיה, אתם רוצים לשנות את החוקים, תעלו אתם להר זיבי הזה.
עוד לא הייתי חוזר עם לוחות בצורה של תחת.
תראה איזה רעיון בא לי. צריך להמציא איזה מילת קוד שאז נשמע, נדע אם זה אונס או לא אונס. נכון, רעיון מצוין. אני אומר, אם הגבר צועק אונס, זה אונס. את רואה, זה נושא מורכב, אי אפשר לפתור אותו ביום אחד.
לא, משה, זה נושא מאוד מאוד חשוב, וצריך לפתור אותו, וחשוב שכולם יבינו מה זה אונס.
אני מבטיח לך שאני אטפל בזה.
אתה מבטיח?
דבר ראשון, איך שאני נכנס לארץ המובטחת, מילה של פליצה. טוב, יאללה, בואי.
As I said, doesn't have a lot to do with
לא.
with the specifics of what we're saying today, except that as we talked about in our very first class, that we learned, one second, let me just get all our people. As we talked about in our very first class, that when new people encounter text, they're going to find different things with it. That it wasn't until perhaps modern people were encountering the text, when women were encountering the text, that anyone said, hey, wait a second, shouldn't there be a thou shalt not rape? As different people come and encounter the text, as different people find new meanings, then that is going to enrich our experience of the text. And that's what we're going to look at a little bit.
And the Torah, the prohibition against rape is explicit. Numbers of Deuteronomy.
It's related. We're talking.
He said it was unrelated.
Oh, okay.
It was just for fun.
Okay. We just got.
You don't have time to read the whole book every day. Just read the last chapter. Okay, you really want to. I really want you to read this.
I can probably if you don't mind a sample one, try to read it all.
No, it's
Let me close that door because I know I talk
Feels
really
so
loud.
delicate. It's kind of oh my god, what's touching.
Okay, so
I just leave it open to welcome people in.
it is lovely. We do want to be welcoming, but we also don't want to disturb the show. So, you know, competing interests. Okay, so I am going to, let's see, there's 3 for y'all.
Thank you.
3 for y'all. So we are going to be looking at a text tonight, and I'm going to share my screen now so that y'all can see it as well. Okay. We are looking at a text tonight that is going to be another example of this, of people encountering a text that may not have been encountered by them before, that will shine new light, that will show us a different way of looking at this text than might have been previously considered. Okay, so just a little bit of setting. What's about to happen is actually a little bit similar to what we saw in that video. It's actually, the more I talk, the more I'm realizing the video I picked actually was a good video. What we're about to see is the short story of the daughters of Tzlafchad, the daughters of Zelophehad, as is commonly transliterated. And as we will see, much like Miriam in the video that we just watched, they come forward with a critique of the rules as given. And so let's just read the story. We're going to read the whole story together, and then we'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll see. We're going to read a text from Dirshuni, which, if you remember, was a book that we read a text from all the way back in our very first class, which is a collection of modern Israeli female writers writing midrash on the text in the style of older midrash. So it's this cool intertextual thing. I figured it was a good way to cap off the class by bringing in a modern voice that sounds ancient, because this class has all been about learning through the different texts. So We're gonna start in the book of Numbers. Would someone who's here in the room like to just read through for us?
If you'll tell me how to say that name.
Zelophehad.
Zelophehad.
But you
Okay.
can say Tzlafchad.
Slafchad. Okay. The daughters of Slafchad of the Masonite family, son of Hefer, son of Gilad, son of Machir, son of, this is a lot of names.
Yeah.
Son of Massa,
Menashe.
son of Joseph came forward. The names of the daughters were Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the chieftains, and the whole assembly at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And they said, our father died in the wilderness. He was not one of the faction, Korah's faction, which banded together against the Lord, but died for his own sin, and he has left no sons. Let not our father's name be lost to his clan just because he had no son. Give us a holding among our father's kinsmen.
Okay, pause there. So I'm just gonna, because this is a little archaic language, just explain what's going on. So these 5 women, Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, they come forward and they say, our father died, he only had daughters, and right now we only have legal mechanism for inheriting for men. We only have legal mechanism that when a father died, the oldest male child gets a double portion and all the other male children get a single portion. And that's how land is passed down. And they say, do not let our father's name be lost to his clan just because he had no sons. Let us inherit the land. So these 5 women are coming forward and saying, in this instance, we should get to inherit because there were no sons to inherit. Okay, we'll talk more about that and we'll ask our questions in a bit. I want to finish the story, but then we'll circle back to this. So go ahead.
Okay. And the Lord said to Moses.
Wait, first Moses brought their case.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Moses brought their case before the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, the fleet of Slafchad's daughter is just. You should give them a hereditary holding amongst their father's kinsmen. Transfer their father's share to them.
Okay. So Benot Slafchad, the daughters of Slafchad, make it to the Supreme Court, God.
Yeah.
And the ruling that gets handed down says, yes, you should give them a hereditary holding amongst their father's kinsmen. Transfer their father's share to them. Okay. Now I'm going to take a step back. What questions do we have about this text? What are our initial reactions to it? I see there's a lot going on, Marta.
Why should daughters only get it when there's no sons?
Why should daughters only get it when there's no sons? Why didn't they come forward to Moses and say, the whole system is broken, we should tear it down, and it should be more egalitarian? It's a good question. I think that it speaks to an incremental approach to justice versus a wholesale approach to justice. In the same way that sometimes change comes because we identify slivers of change and then it's incremental, and sometimes change comes in a tidal wave. But yeah, and it could be that if they had tried that, then they would have been rejected. So they were trying to do what they could. But that's wonderful. Great. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no. I mean, it wasn't an aspersion on them. It's just the question that you had to ask from the 20th or 21st century.
Absolutely.
I'm sure
from a 21st century mind, there seems like that's a no-brainer question. Great. Yeah.
I have a legit. Whoa, that was bad.
Yeah. We're getting a lot of. Phone. Can you keep your? I'll call you after. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a logistics question. So, like, if the oldest son got a double portion and the rest just got single portions, how is it divided amongst the daughters? Is it just equal division, or is it?
Good question. Are they asking for each of them to get an even slice, or is Machla in line to get a double portion?
Right.
It's a good question. All right, Lewis, would you like to unmute and add anything?
Okay, it's pretty tough for the girls. They didn't get anything back in the old tent. Not even a goat, not even a chicken.
Okay, great. Well, the women would get, they just wouldn't get as a hereditary portion. What women would get was a dowry.
Yeah.
So women would get money and sometimes land from the family, but it was in essence a gift to their husband.
Yeah, that feels
Now, as we're not gonna go into it, but like what ends up happening with the daughters of Slafchad is that they all marry, and so the land does eventually kind of get owned by their husbands because of ancient property rights, but that's neither here nor there right now. Any other thoughts, questions,
But
things
they
that come
married
up here?
relatives, correct?
What?
They married relatives.
They married from within the tribe,
from
within the
here.
tribe of Menashe. No, it did not have to be Machirites,
Okay.
but it had to be within
Menashe.
Menashe.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, things that come up here, things that are interesting about this?
That they go straight
It
to
just wasn't fair.
It goes straight.
There's-
Wonderful.
go to, or
Yeah, the question goes to Moses, and then there's now. Lewis, I really need you to stay muted until I call on you because there's a lot of like echo. So just stay muted until I call on you. That there's not a long appeals process. That there's not a lot of steps. It goes to Moses. Moses doesn't know the answer. Moses goes to God.
it's like, what do you do with woman? Let's ask God. What are women anyway?
Right, like it wasn't so right. So there's a couple things there. One is like, why wasn't it included to begin with? And that's one of the questions that we're going to see in this midrash. Is wait a second, didn't we just get these laws from God? Why do we need to go back to God to ask questions so quickly? And then the other thing is right. There's not a hierarchy. There's not like you go to one person, they ask another person, they ask the next person. It's a direct appeal, and it's like, oh, we don't know what to do with this. Great. I'm going to call on Cindy first because I saw she put something in the chat. But Cindy, I'd love if you could just share what it is with everyone. And then Lewis will go to you. So just hold on. Don't unmute yet. We're going to go to Cindy and then to you.
Well, I think part of the reason why only sons were to be given land was because they thought that the daughters, that the daughters would marry into a different family, and therefore the land would be lost to the family.
Right. So later on, as this gets resolved, there are issues around tribal allocation of land. And what happens if a woman from Menashe, was able to inherit, and then she marries a man from Benjamin, then their children are going to be Benjaminites. And so then does Menashe's land go over to Benjamin? And it creates this whole problem in that way. So that's right. That was if you asked someone in biblical times, why couldn't women inherit? That certainly, Cindy, would have been part of the answer. Was it just would get too confusing. Then Benjamin, which is down in the south, would be owning shares in Menashe, which is up in the north. And we can't be having that because it gets too confusing, because the woman would go to live with her husband. So what would happen to the land that she left behind? You get the picture. There would be lots of logistical issues with it, but that doesn't necessarily, but again, to a 21st century mind, the first thing we might think is, well, so they'd figure that out, she can sell her shit, whatever happens. But wonderful. Thank you. Yes, Lewis.
It, pretty much, you can see this living out today the same way the Taliban and the Afghanistan people survive, and the women have absolutely no right to anything.
Yeah, so we can see not only in Afghanistan, but in a few places around the world, we do continue to see women not being able to own property. Like here in the U.S., women couldn't sign up for their own credit cards until the 1960s, 1970s. So this is
82.
What?
82.
82. I apologize.
Master's laws. We're
I
still on the
apologize.
books. They're still on the books in Louisiana, by the way. But
Back in
that's
the
neither here nor
Homestead
there.
days, They if have the jobs.
Man died, they lost the homestead.
Right. So yeah, so there are all these issues. They're right. This is not ancient history, but yeah, we're not going to get into anything else modern political about this right now. What we're going to do instead, if you'll flip over your page here, and I'm going to go down. So Rivka Lubitch is a modern darshanit, a modern writer of midrash, and I want to explain one thing quickly before we get in. There's this character at the beginning. You see Tanot. Tanot is a character that Rivka Lubitch created, who is, in her mind, a biblical character named Bat Yiftach, or the daughter of Yiftach. I just need to explain who that is for a second in order to make all of this make a little bit more sense. So in the book of Judges, Yiftach is one of the judges who's going to go and fight for the Jews to, protect them from everyone. And he makes a deal with God. He says, God, if you help me win this battle, when I get home, the first thing that comes out of my house, I will sacrifice to you. And so Yiftach goes and wins the battle and comes home. And the first thing to come out of his house to greet him is his daughter. And unlike the story in Genesis where God stops the sacrifice from happening, Yiftach actually sacrifices his daughter to God. It's the one kind of example of Israelite or proto-Jewish human sacrifice in the Bible. It's super problematic, and Bat Yiftach, the daughter of Yiftach, is never given a name, and so Rivka Lubitch names Bat Yiftach Tanot, and Tanot serves as this like questioning figure who like questions a lot of things that God does. Now, you could imagine if you came out to greet your dad when he came home from battle and then you got sacrificed, you'd question a lot of things God did too. So it makes sense, but she's giving agency and voice to a character that had no voice. And so this character kind of serves as a foil sometimes to God, and a feminist foil. And so we're gonna see this kind of back and forth argument between Tanot and God in this midrash. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit before we dived in, so that it would make a little bit more sense. So do I have someone in the Zoomiverse who wants to read for us at the start, this first paragraph? Okay.
I can do it.
Go, Cindy.
Okay. To know as God, if the daughters of Sephlahah spoke truly, why did you not write so to begin with in your Torah? You are true, and your Torah is true, and your words last forever.
Great.
Okay.
So the central question of this midrash is what is a little bit kind of like what Rachel said, which is, wait a second, why did they even have to go together? Like, did they not plan for there to be women and that sometimes people would have no male children? Like, because God specifically says the daughters of Tzlafchad spoke justly. Dovrot ken benot Tzlafchad dovrot. So she says, if they spoke justly, why didn't it say that to begin with? Why did these women have to come forward and argue about it in order to get what was right? So that's our central framing question for this midrash. So Cindy, will you read one more little paragraph?
Sure. God responded to her, truth will spring up from the earth.
Right.
Tanot asked.
No, that's it. That's good. That's great.
Okay.
So the structure of this midrash now is going to be this kind of conversation back and forth between Tanot and God about this question, but they're going to do something that is often found in midrash. They're going to quote verses of the Bible at each other, because that's in the rabbinic mind. How do you win an argument? You come up with the best Bible quotes. So God, who is the wisest and most and would win all the arguments, what is God going to be really good at? Quoting from the Bible, bringing up Bible quotes in support of God's arguments. So God's first quote is in Hebrew, Emet me'eretz titzmach. Truth will spring up from the earth. So God says, well, it says in the Bible, sometimes the truth has to come up from the earth. What does Tanot say? Let's get someone in here. Jeff.
God responded to her.
So the next one,
I'm sorry,
Tanot
I
asked.
skipped that. Yeah. Tanakh asked, does the verse not say the Torah of the Lord is perfect?
Tamima. So Tanot says, oh, okay, God, you can quote the Bible. I can quote the Bible too. I'm going to quote this other verse from Psalms that says, Torah Hashem Tamima. The Torah of God is perfect. And if the Torah of God is perfect, then you shouldn't need someone to come forward and say, hey, wait a second, what about women? Let's keep going. Jeff?
God responded to her, I've already written in my Torah, you must be wholehearted, tamim, with the Lord your God. And further, walk in my ways and be blameless. There is truth.
Great. Oh, well, so hold on one sec. So great. So now we're getting a little bit of wordplay, another favorite of the Midrashists. So God is kind of punning back on this word tamim. That yes, the Torah of Hashem is tamimah, is perfect, but you must be wholehearted, tamim, and walk in my ways and be tamim. That there's an idea here of growth, of walking with God, of being in partnership with God. God is saying it's not just up to me to give, but there's a relationship here. That the word for walking, hit alech lifnei, is a reflexive in the Hebrew. That there's some sense of partnership, some sense of reflexiveness, some sense of being together within this idea of tamim, within this idea of blameless or perfect. Okay, great. So then now we kind of revert back to narrator voice. So now this is kind of Rivka Lubitch speaking. Marta, will you read for us this bottom paragraph?
There is truth that descends from on high, and there is truth that springs up from below. Fortunate is the generation wherein truth from above meets truth from below, as it is written. Truth springs up from the heaven, from the earth. Justice looks down from the heavens.
So how does Rivka Lubitch kind of like close this? How does she square this circle?
She goes back to God's first quote from Psalm 85.
Right, but she includes the whole verse this time.
Yes.
There's more to the verse than what God said.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that do? What does that look like?
She's basically saying that humans on Earth, we can make questions and have our truths and whatnot, and then we'll bring them to God, and God will be the answer of the questions and the confirmation of the truth.
Great, that there's a partnership here, that we on Earth are entitled to having questions, to having, our truth, and that God will then be an arbiter in many ways for what that looks like. I saw Beth unmuted herself first, and then Estella. So Beth and then Estella.
Can you please scroll up?
Oh my goodness. Yes. There you go. Is that all? Did you have anything you wanted to add? Any thoughts?
No, I just wanted to read it again. I couldn't see it.
Yeah, so I think that this is a really powerful idea. And this gets back to a lot of what we talked about in this class, is this connection between divine and human. And we approach that in different ways. The mystics approach, the connection between divine and human in a different way. The rabbis tried to figure out what are the ways in which we can follow the rules in order to be better in line with the divine. The midrashists were trying to figure out how do we interpret the text in order to be better in line with the divine. Each of the things that we looked at was, in many ways, how do we make truth spring up from the earth to meet the justice that's coming down from heaven? And so I thought this was a really beautiful midrash to kind of like bring as a sort of closing midrash to tie in some of the ideas that we've had here in this class. Yes, Charlie.
Do you know when that was written?
This midrash?
Yeah.
I believe 2012, somewhere in the like early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, early teens. Okay. Yeah. So this is 21st century midrash. But as we noted, it used a lot of the style. Like if you just read this, in Hebrew, it reads like a midrash. Besides the fact that it's pretty feminist, it reads like a midrash that could have been written 1,500 years ago. It's written in the style and in the technique of older midrash, but has a very modern message. Any other questions or comments first on this specific midrash and this story? I'm just gonna stop sharing for a sec. All right. So then now I wanted to take a few minutes, and I wanted to open it up and see if folks had any lingering reflections or questions or things that you've been holding on to, questions that you had at one class that you never got a chance to ask, thoughts kind of having been through. I know some of you have been to all 10 classes, some of you have been to 1 or 2 classes, but anything that you've gleaned that you wanna share, that you wanna give out, either as a thought or a question that you're carrying with you as you move out of this class. You can take a second to think. No pressure to answer right away. Hi, Justin. Just gonna give everyone a few like a minute or two to think, and then see it. All right, Charlie, I saw you had raised your hand.
So I was watching an interview with a Protestant pastor named, I don't know if you're familiar with him, William Sloan.
Maybe just speak up a little bit. So that that's good.
William Sloan Coffin, who's a Protestant pastor.
Yeah.
And it was an interview with him, and he had mentioned that he said in his religion, in his view of religion, your consciousness your conscience should supersede any dogma or anything that you think is conveyed to you. Do you think that that applies to Judaism? If you feel like something deep-rooted morally isn't in alignment with something that you were taught explicitly, then you should follow your conscience.
Yeah, so the question, in case you weren't able to hear, was kind of, should you follow your conscience if you feel that it goes against your religion's dogma? In Judaism, one of the traditional tools of interpretation is what's known as svar, or your own reason. It's not exactly conscience, but it's reason. It's your own kind of moral thoughts and analytical thoughts and all of that together. And I think that that's one very important tool in the toolbox. I think it's dangerous to say that any one tool in the toolbox is the right tool, because I think that if you say your moral conscience is more important than anything else, then you can slide into relativism really quickly. So I think that part of what it means to have an inherited tradition that we trust is that we don't do that it gives us like a grounding and it gives us a basis. But it is one of the tools. You absolutely have to use your own intuition and that if things are not squaring for you, you have to use that. You don't just go along blindly. But I think that it's a balance. I don't think that it's a whatever you feel in your kishkas must be right. But I also don't think that you're supposed to not use your own reason. I think that the answer lies somewhere in between. Any other bigger picture thoughts or questions or very specific things that you had written down from a class 3 weeks ago that you didn't get a chance to ask that's really been burning you up? Anything else on folks' mind?
So there are things that we know now on, let's say, the rules about that deaf people can't be witnesses, or because of course, I'm assuming when they didn't even know that deaf people could understand anything, and so that was a legitimate thing. But now, of course, there's ways around that.
Yeah.
So once they know something like that, well, there's no more the rabbis, but do they go and try to make?
Yeah, so one of the things that we talk, so the question is, as new realities present themselves that are different than the realities of the Talmud or kind of more historical writers, do we go and try to change or fix, or however you want to put it? How does specifically probably Jewish law continue to grow and evolve?
Right, because I remember having this discussion with my rabbi a long time ago, and he said it's not, if it's specifically, from Torah and from very difficult to find ways around it.
Yeah, so the specific question that you brought up is, can deaf people serve as witnesses? Because in the time of the Talmud, there was no sign language. There was no way for those who could not hear to or speak to kind of make themselves be understood, or to understand in many ways. And so, yeah, it would have made sense at the time that someone who was incapable of comprehending what was happening could serve as a witness. The way that Jewish law evolves, we talked a little bit about in our with a accordion kind of theory of halacha. And the piece that we talked about at the end was she'elot and tshuvot, or responsa literature. And that's where you see the most evolution in Jewish law. And so I don't know if that specific question was answered in a response of the conservative movement or the reform movement, or, you know, even an Orthodox, post-second Orthodox rabbi may have answered it. But it is, you know, it's where we get, you know, if you have a question like, can you light an electric Chanukiah and have it and say the blessings? Right? That's not something they were dealing with in the Talmud, but that's something that we have to think about now. If we're going to say that turning on and off lights counts as lighting a fire on Shabbat, then should an electric Chanukiah also count as a Chanukiah? And rabbis, including like really major rabbis, will write responsa in which they try to figure out the answer to the question. And what they'll do is they have to try to mine what's the reasoning, what's the svara behind all of the rules and regulations, and how do we apply that to our new information that we have today. So and rabbis will come to different conclusions. So there might be a rabbi that says, it clearly says in the Talmud that a deaf person can't be a witness, therefore a deaf person can't be a witness. Rabbi B might say, well, it says that because they weren't able to comprehend. So now that a deaf person can comprehend, really what this rule is about, because you look at all the different categories of people who can't be witnesses, really what this rule is about is that people who can't comprehend can't be witnesses. So therefore, if a deaf person has full comprehension and is able to, you know, show that, then of course they can be a witness. And different rabbis will come to different conclusions. And that's not just like an Orthodox conservative thing, that's within the Orthodox world, within the conservative world, you know, people will come to different conclusions about these things. And so part of Judaism is figuring out, you know, who do you follow? Who's your Rebbe? Who's your person who, you know, when they say, this is the way to go, because Judaism does endorse you using your own reasoning, but it also wants you to trust your rabbis. Everyone should obviously, of course, always trust everything their rabbi says. We are infallible.
You're not the Pope.
But yeah, no, we're not. There's no one second. There's no Pope. There's no one saying this is, you know, I have direct line of, you know, whatever. We don't have that. Any other thoughts or questions? And then we're gonna try. Actually, let's just go. Okay, we're gonna try.
One thought on that is the conservative movement has ruled, and I don't know the explanation for it, that homosexual unions are legitimate.
Yes.
Which is certainly not the tradition. If you asked a rabbi 1,000 years ago, he'd say this.
Certainly not.
How did they come to that?
So there's a whole responsum that you can read. We could teach a class on that if you'd like. That's a much bigger question. Essentially, what the ruling boiled down to was there's a very core mitzvah in the Torah, what's called Kvod Habriot, which is giving honor and respect to all of God's creations, and that if we truly believe that, which I do, and science does, and everyone and most people do, that people are born queer and are born, you know, with their sexuality and gender expression, that to dishonor or disrespect them by not allowing them the full expression of their sexuality and their gender is a worse thing to do than to not let them, than to say you can't get that. Yeah, it would be worse to disrespect them by saying they can't get married than to allow queer unions, even though it is on its face a biblical prohibition. That's the core argument. There's a lot more to be said and a lot more to be written about that, but that's the core argument of that response. Okay, so people in here are going to pair up. So you're just going to get two of you, Jeff and Marta, and Ellie. If you pass this down to Jeff, and then the two of you. And in Zoom land, how many folks do we have who are not on video? Just Lewis. Okay. So in Zoom land, I'm also going to pair you up, and you are going to get. Oh, Lewis is here. Great. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So there'll be one group of 2 and one group of 3, and I'm going to get you some pens in a second. If you have a pen, you can pull it out, but I can grab you pens if you don't. If you're here. Lewis, can you please keep yourself? Okay. So if you're here, I'm gonna put you into some breakout rooms. Good. We've got some pens there. Pens, great. You guys, can y'all share? Can someone share a pen with them?
Yeah.
Oh, Marta. Okay. And like just Marta and Jeff maybe go down to the end of the table so that you can talk and not be like right in their ears. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to do a little round robin. So we are going to be creating, and I'm just going to share my screen here so y'all can see what we're doing. And then once I put you into breakout rooms, I'm going to give you your texts. So y'all are going to be working. Technology is hard.
Yeah.
You need
Okay,
a degree in
so-
computer science to be a rabbi.
We are doing tractate text me back. So what you have in the top middle is a Mishnah. Because remember in our Talmud class, we learned that Talmud starts with Mishnah. And then the Gemara is a commentary on the Mishnah. So the Mishnah here is from Pirkei Avot. And there's actually no Gemara on Pirkei Avot. There's no Talmud Masechet Pirkei Avot. There was never Gemara written on it. So it's not, it's in the Talmud because it's in the Mishnah, but there's no like Talmud of Pirkei Avot. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be kind of writing our own. So with the person who you're with now, you're going to focus on number 1. So whatever sheet you have, there's a thing in the first that says Gemara, which is commentary on Mishnah. And you might pose or answer one or more questions, and I gave you a few examples. But essentially, talk to your chavruta. You're going to have about 7 to 10 minutes. Talk to your chavruta and try to come up with one central thing that you want to comment on this Mishnah. Perhaps one that each of you, and you can write like, Lauren says da 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 da, but Rachel says da 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 da. Or, Jeff says this, but Marta, answered back with an argument and said, no, it's actually that. So you're going to kind of co-write a little bit of Gemara. So you're going to have like 10 minutes to do that. In your breakout rooms, I'm going to send you a Google Doc so you'll be able to do this on Google. So that's what you're going to do. So if you're in the room, go online. I'm going to get you into your breakout rooms right now. So 1 second. Now I have it.
Yeah.
Breakout rooms.
This is also the same last time.
So what you want to do, Gemara, Rashi.
So I'm going to send you into your breakout rooms, and then I'm going to share the Google Docs once you're in your breakout rooms.
These guys are his grandsons.
Why not use alliteration?
Oh, yeah.
You got the temple, the Torah, and
Vaguely.
you get the text of the deed. You can use another T word. Or a tech word. Okay. You actually go back there.
Sections commented on. Well, this is about being careful. It's like the small.
Now I want it to be finished, all be alliterated.
I guess, one thing you might say, does this only apply to the
Alliteration is important.
Much nicer, like my Illinois color.
We're enjoying it. Do better.
Very warning in Shafris, it's in Montevideo.
More catchy. More catchy.
It's from Deuteronomy, and then the other
Relationship.
paragraphs of it. We read that in services this evening.
What's the reward?
Let's see if there's a Siddur
A
here, which
sacrifice.
there must be. It's gotta be in there.
Like, what? So, yeah. Then that's more than 3 things. No. Let me sacrifice different things. Are those different sacrifices? But they're all I'm sorry. I can't help myself. It's just like, stupid questions are my favorite. I know, this is I love studying Torah. Like
So
the
your
one
reward,
thing, and then
what
you
is
can
your
argue that the sacrifices.
Sure, you're more learned. Just
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Somewhere in here.
That
we
was a good
have
question.
breakfast.
And the good deeds
Tomorrow
are
after
also,
this.
you know what's a good question though for realty?
Here it is.
That comes a lot of philosophy.
Right.
Definition
Starts
of
with
good.
this and then goes all the way
What's a good feeling? Like what is good?
to
Right. And then what is a good deed? Is a good deed a thought
Here.
or an action? Or is a thought an action?
this and that.
Well, I mean,
Right.
I'm
There's
saying
an
that
example.
it's
of a
based
person
around
that studied a lot of Torah.
but I,
And it's considered a
I
central
mean,
prayer.
I would imagine that their version of good deed, that if they
It's,
what is a good deed?
traditionally recited if
Right, but
they
then why would you
die,
include good
confession
deeds
of
when
faith.
the good deeds are for the Torah?
Yes, and then 11 is
Some
for the
asking
Torah,
for
but you
an
have to like
example
refer,
of a
like,
person.
or interpret.
Right.
So it's like
Last
if people have different
paragraph.
interpretations, which one's the
Paragraph.
good?
Yeah,
So I
says
would
you
say, what
So,
is
so
good?
Rachel says,
Yeah, says something about morning and evening.
What
I
is
can't
good?
What is
remember.
good?
Yeah, so
And
I
then
say
Lauren
in
says,
Shabbos, in our
from the Torah.
As a guide
What
for
is
the
the
rest
Torah?
of, yeah.
Yeah, so he very well. And I say, translated.
Yeah, or.
So,
or his
it's so squiggly.
If you want to start writing the Gemara,
I would say, and I said, how do you?
We're not gonna write the
But what if
Gemara,
there's
we're gonna do
multiple
Rashi.
conditions as well?
No, you're doing the Gemara. You're doing the Gemara.
We're going to Gemara, okay.
I think what is
Okay.
that?
So
Yeah,
Moses
that
is
is-
on
the
it's in
tangible.
Torah.
Right.
They're gonna comment on what you write. You're doing this.
I see, okay.
You found the Shema?
But what?
I came across, second bracha before the Shema, so I figured it's close.
So it could be.
But how do we interpret this? So which I apologize.
No, you're fine.
It's okay, I don't heard it.
I guess suppose, I mean.
I can look at things and like that spelled right, but
I cannot, I can look at it. I will, I spell some, I
So
still,
it could be.
I do a lot of things with perception. So I use that word frequently and I always spell it wrong. I never notice it.
Just
Well,
recognize
no,
it's
I don't know if
The preference and perception
Sure,
is.
Reuben's
Yeah,
Shema,
I don't know.
say, do not
Hold
make
on,
your
wait.
prayer something
No.
automatic.
Confused myself.
Compassion.
Maybe,
God.
maybe. Just
This
recognition.
Well respected. Well
Respect
respected.
that's.
is also from the Torah, I can't remember
Does
what,
that make sense?
This is the one.
exactly where.
what
It's,
is it?
I mean.
what this has to do with the Shema,
Yeah,
I
that makes
don't know.
I have another question.
Let's just ask, but let's just leave the question unanswered. I like this.
Yeah, so like, how do you interpret what's going in the
This
Torah?
is from
But
Deuteronomy
why-
and
Oh,
Numbers.
that's a good example.
Okay, now this
So that's
quote is
so
from
Great example.
the Torah, I'm not sure which book. It's one of the times the people were revolting and God wanted to wipe them all
I
out.
think that's a
And Moses said, no,
terrific
please
example.
don't. And God says, say this prayer and be lenient. So I don't remember if that
Yeah,
Exodus, maybe Numbers, I'm not sure. But I'm sure with no
I
idea.
know. But that's kind of the opposite.
My father
of what
specified good
they're
deeds and
doing.
implemented in the Torah.
They're
So I
I never
still
went to
sacrifice
rabbi
anybody
school,
who
so
like
what is
committed
it?
it. Human sacrifice.
Graphically.
Human sacrifice. Well,
Okay,
God,
so we're gonna
you know,
comment on
allows
this.
commands human sacrifice, and thus that must be a good
Clarifying,
deed.
asking
So if it's in the
questions.
Torah,
Right,
then I can
exactly.
just go kill people.
I'd
Or
like
the
to
name
ask
of God.
questions.
Well,
I think
Yeah.
we all.
I'm
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
does it only apply to the Shema?
no, I mean, I'm saying like, for this,
Yeah,
like,
there are other
there's
prayers
three
we
things,
recite.
right?
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
I
Oh,
don't,
I
in
see,
the
so
Shema
why
it
bother-
comes,
So
I
why
don't
bother
know
specifying
how
good
much of the
deeds
prayer
when they're
book
specified in the
is
Torah?
there.
So maybe then the good deeds come,
This is,
not just
the
within the
Mishnah was
Torah.
compiled somewhere
Right, exactly, so
around
why
the year
specify?
200 Common
Why?
Era.
So
Or
here's
maybe
the
like
point.
there's other,
Did we have the
Good
Amidah then? I
deeds,
think so.
not
After
all
the
Torah.
But is
temple was
that-
destroyed is when
Isn't the Torah end all?
rabbis
be
came
all?
up with these prayers to replace sacrifices.
maybe because
And
two
the
things are
Amidah,
boring.
central to replacing the sacrifice.
I feel like we are kind of circling this one without asking, right, like why?
And why this is in here, I'm not sure.
To me though, it's like, you read the Torah as like a singular.
Please for
Simple
the Shema should be a
sacrifice.
complete,
Or good deeds,
plea
to
for
me, it's even more
compassion
than
from God.
anything.
But
And
the
then
Torah
if,
is
Aren't
but then
others-
if you wanna go.
Other prayers are.
Torah's not good.
Well, I usually think of the Torah as.
Certainly in the
scroll,
daily
But there's some
Amidah,
levels too.
The Talmud is a.
there are a lot of paragraphs relating to
The book with chapters, the chapter book.
asking God for
With
a
like
lot of things,
sub-chapters.
including, good
I like that,
harvest
is a
and
book a singular, or
sorts of
because it
things
has
you wanna
chapters, is it
think
plural?
of.
Ooh, I love that
and
question,
health
I'm gonna bring it up one day
and
then.
all of the
In the
special
class,
paragraphs
we're like,
that
wait,
deal with
multiple,
that.
all books are plural.
I like how we're
So,
completely avoiding this.
why not the why didn't say the
I
Amidah?
don't know what to talk
Should
about.
not do it
sacrifices.
automatically.
Well, so,
Yeah.
okay, like
Why
you don't
Shema
actually know, or
specifically?
like you want. Well, like,
And I don't know the
but it's
answer.
very vague. Even the good deeds, to me, it comes out as it's like very vague. So if you have a rule, you have to make it very specific
Okay.
and very like.
So the thing is that when this is written, you have to understand.
Oh, here, when you lie down and when you rise up, that's why we say it, Marv and Shah.
This was something that they had lived with up until this time.
Well, I was
I
thinking
know it
of
was in there
like,
somewhere.
but if there's different types of sacrifices, which one is he specifically referring to?
It seems like
All
a-
of them.
I think he's just really.
I just want more.
And it says,
like,
you know,
detail. I
you
think
do
that's
all these
why
things,
it's
things will be
specified.
good for
I'm
you,
telling
so
you, you can do
yes,
better.
God's being compassionate, but so is God the Amidah as well.
Exactly, I agree.
The daily Amidah specifically, because traditionally on
I
Shabbat
got individual
and
capacity,
holidays,
that's plural.
we don't,
Yeah,
make-
that's
we
good.
don't ask God for all these things, we do some, but not nearly as much.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
daily Amidah, and let's see, somewhere in this.
I don't actually know if that is the word for sacrifice, but that's the name. So this is, so there's three things in the world. He said, so God said that there are three things in the world. No, whatever. Yeah.
Let's welcome you to Shabbat.
Out to the Torah, Ve'el ha'avodah. So that must be. So that's singular.
It
is singular.
There. And
So why is it singular in Hebrew, plural in English?
actually, let's see, here's got
Wait,
the
to the
table of
internet.
contents.
To the internet.
Morning service Shachar at 98. Okay.
Don't they have
Let's
like
start writing down
Well, that's
like our
our
line where
Shabbat.
it's
I'm,
from?
you know, I'm
I
looking
can't
for.
just take it. Wait, no, I
Yeah,
can do
okay, go
this.
ahead. I'm sure your handwriting's better than mine.
Oh,
Mine's so bad I can't read it myself.
What?
That's Shabbat.
you just
Weekday service.
Okay,
264.
those of you in the room,
Oh, my sister.
how are we doing? Do we have a few things written?
He's starting to write a few things.
Yeah.
Starting to write a few things, okay. Like, in the next 2 minutes, try to like finish up your Gemara section. You should only be writing in the Gemara section.
Yes.
Okay, here is the
So,
Amidah.
there's a service there.
So this is, so different translation.
Yeah.
So it's the,
So this is the request for personal transformation. Have repentance, redemption. So we're asking God for a lot of things. Repentance, we want to be redeemed.
1 minute, 1 minute.
Healing and prosperity, all these things are in the Amidah we're petitioning God, so
I was gonna say, what does that translate to?
that should be
It's like something of their fault.
in here
Ethics
too.
of our father,
Ethics of our
ethics of
father.
our
Why not?
sayings of our ancestors.
Okay.
Now, what,
Yeah.
I guess we're supposed to come up with some possible answers to that.
Yeah.
You have any?
Okay, whatever you have written is great. Everyone pass your papers one group to the left.
okay.
Left.
So we had one.
And
Like
we're a little low on
school
time, so we're not gonna do
reading.
multiple
Yeah.
rotations, but we're gonna get one Rashi in, okay?
Okay,
So
one
you are now Rashi
Right.
to the
Yeah,
Gemara
Rashi.
that's in front of you. So
Okay.
now you are commenting
Oh,
on what the last group wrote. You are the next layer of commentary.
So it's a different.
So you're looking at the
No, we're
Gemara
gonna
that was just
go with
written,
what they
and you're
wrote
adding
and
your own comments.
Put it here.
What if not much was written?
Well,
We didn't write much, no.
Hey,
They
sorry.
didn't- We
What
didn't
does
want to
that
make it
say?
easy for you.
So did we.
Tangible.
Tangible. Okay.
If you- what- your
No, it's
questions-
okay.
Your questions of what is
So
good.
their mission says, he rabbi
Okay.
What
should Rashi say about what is good?
At liberty to reflect it. Wherever we should be given much reward for those.
Oh, this is a different.
Different, yeah, they have different. And then the great.
I get it. Sorry.
Okay, so tangible and
Okay.
tangible is their first question.
Good is Torah.
I'm assuming.
How do we
there.
interpret what the Torah means as
Well, so this
good?
is one.
Why bother specifying
And there's
good
another one.
deeds when they're commanded in the Torah?
Or maybe this is their own question.
Yeah,
And
the
the-
Torah has a lot of mitzvot.
Are these answers?
Mitzvot in it, 613, to be
So-
specific. Don't ask me to name them all.
Intangible
I can't.
or, no, tangible or intangible.
Those are things we're required to
So,
do, but
I
then
guess
there's
they're
some that
asking
have come
about,
out
like,
long
what
after the
is
Torah.
the
Like cleaning
reward,
Hanukkah
right.
candles is not in the Torah.
So, like, what is
Because
your
Hanukkah
employer's
didn't
food
exist.
reward for labor
I'm
and
talking much
their
later.
reward for, like, this-
And the
I wanna know what
observance of
righteousness means.
other holidays
That's a great
like
question.
Purim, by Bowman,
I'm
not in
assuming
the
it's
Torah.
time.
They came out later. The rabbis felt they had the authority to make these rulings. You can disagree,
No,
but.
maybe not.
Uh-huh.
I only know like 2 words.
Okay. So why did specifying good deeds? Specify good deeds, or how do we interpret what's good? As Rabbi was saying earlier, texts are open to interpretation,
Tangible or intangible. I'm assuming they're talking about.
and particularly since some of them are a
So-
little vague
Like rewards from God or intangible.
in
They're like, that's a
what
great
they
question.
state, which is probably common still today, but in ancient times
Oh, we put
certainly.
in their
Number
own
2, maybe a
mistake.
legacy, or is there?
Somebody who, I had to do something.
The ancient Roman oracles, you could interpret something 16 different ways, so they were always right. That's one way to be right.
Yeah.
In certain
So,
levels of
okay,
grace.
we are.
So what is reward
And,
of righteousness in this world?
But in the
What is an
Torah,
example of, so what is, so that's,
it's not,
maybe a legacy,
not
they're
really
answering the
always
question.
explicit. My intention is that if I had to write things on parchment with a quill pen, I would be very sparse in the use of words also.
Yeah.
They didn't have word
I'll
processors,
be right back, y'all.
Okay, so.
which incidentally improves my penmanship dramatically.
You want to get an A on a test, or you want to, you're not,
But somebody picked
Uh-huh.
it, somebody picked, somebody picked it. Yeah.
you don't want
Okay,
anything out of it.
Why specify what is good?
Uses golden words.
You want to do the writing? It's nice to let you. I went to school and reading and writing arithmetic, that's so.
The essential.
Okay, so.
66
intangible- so number
Same
one,
day, is
to
it?
be firm.
So are we gonna write about that one too?
Insist on
Right about what,
right,
you know,
intangible.
comment on what
God
they
is
said.
intangible,
God
that
is
What is
intangible.
good?
That's right. That is it.
Okay, her answer was
Intangible.
Torah.
The reward is always
Because it's not a
intangible.
prayer.
Is only the Torah good?
So God is intangible.
The question I
As it
have
is.
from
Something,
Laura,
something, something.
Did the Rashi add questions or just explain?
does it say he expounds on Midrash and Gemara? Okay, you have to
Okay.
expound.
Okay,
I'm
so.
not real familiar with Rashi.
Oh, it does.
Maybe one of these other things that I know is rabbinical.
You can like.
Our reward is for the first.
Two to three
Right.
more minutes for your Rashi. 2 to 3 more
Okay.
minutes.
Oh, for Rashi.
So legacy is just a
Let's
bonus.
say, you know, good isn't, let's say good is not limited to the Torah. You can find good other places.
So is that why you think that it says good deeds is separate from the Torah? Do you think that?
Well, the mitzvot and the Torah are, you know, commandments. You should do all these 613 things, some of which we can't now, if there's no temple, for example. That, but they're
Love
hundreds
it.
still.
Love everything about it. And you also do. Because I feel bad when it does happen.
I wasn't sure if I do God or God asterisks or God.
Some of the
I do, I
things.
don't know what the mood is. I feel like I would give it like line, like God.
Why is this mitzvah necessarily a good deed?
The person doesn't have to be paying attention about everyday events.
Make
The
that
reward
argument.
doesn't have to be external.
Exactly.
The mitzvot that are just ritual, and those that are moral, ethical. And again, I'm not going to go into the details or my opinion on that because I have some.
Anyway.
I'm very opinionated. I assure you.
More than likely, the people who did.
Why do you have to specify good deeds? What do you think? Why do they specify good deeds?
There you go.
Wouldn't the temple sacrifices also be mentioned in the Torah then?
Oh, absolutely.
We did it.
That's,
We did it
that's,
come
so we don't do them now because we don't have a
Right.
temple.
It might
Because
just
they're on
be
the Torah.
doubling down on it. It's
Something
2 out of
really
the
like
3
live
are
action
contained in the
movie.
first.
Yeah. Dora and the Lost City of Gold.
It might be saying the Torah, but then specifically the temple
Okay.
sacrifices and good deeds.
Fair.
Like
Okay.
the mitzvah.
They are going to be coming back in from.
It's like.
Write it.
They're going to be coming back in from the breakout rooms in a minute. We're going to welcome them back with open arms and smiles on our face. And everyone can kind of come to a close on your Rashi. Your Rashiing.
I didn't know that was.
Now
a
all we need is
participle.
Chuck to disagree with us.
What?
Now all we need is Chuck to disagree with us.
Yes, right, exactly. Now all we need is Chuck. We'll show them all to him on Wednesday. Right, one second.
Big Chuck Fassler.
Yeah,
He likes to argue with her.
he does a
Well,
lot.
he's a lawyer. He argues with everybody.
This is true.
Almost there. There they go. And they're coming back.
Hey!
Hello.
Okay.
All right. So this was just a little exercise that I thought would be fun. It was a way to do a little bit more partner learning, a little bit more getting to know each other and getting to, because I think that for me, a big part of this class has also been getting to know all of you and getting to learn with and from all of you. And I know we went a little bit over in order to make this work a little bit, but I hope you'll all forgive me. And I hope that you all got a little something out of this. I hope that you got a little something out of looking at text and thinking, what are the questions I have? What are the answers I might have to some of those questions? What do I think about the questions somebody else had? Did I like the question they had? Did I think the question they had was silly? Or should they have maybe answered it instead of only asking it? That all of these things are all good, and that's what it means to go through layers of Jewish text. That Jewish text is something that once you get past the Bible is almost always layered, is almost always multifaceted, is almost always multivocal, and is almost always multiple people coming together to create text. And so I hope that as we move forward and as I teach more classes and as we do all these things, that we will all take this foundation of what it means to engage with text, of what it means to text me back. So thank you all so much for being a part of this class. And I look forward to many more opportunities to learn with and from all of you in the future. Erev Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.
Another class to
Oh,
discuss.
left
whether-
handed, yeah.
Thanks, Rabbi. Do we get a certificate of completion and authenticity?
Romans thought
It's
we were
it is
They're
for its
gone,
own
we're here.
sake.
Good
Yeah.
question, Louis.
You can take-
I wanted to add that to my resume.
We're the only ones that
All
are.
right. Thank you all for being here. Take care. Have a good night.
Should we give them back their,
I'm sure he wants